Right now, it's a time where everybody's thinking about how do I go online? Because everyone's working from home. Everyone has to figure out how to make this work. That's where my shift was. When the lockdown happened, I lost half my business. Overnight, I lost half my business. I was like, what? That's crazy.
Welcome to Rev Up Your Potential with Hilda Gann, and my guest today is Allan Pollett, and he is an SEO guru, so we're in for a great treat. So thanks for joining us, Allan.
Thanks for having
me. I know that we just did a bio on you, and one of the things I was curious when I read the bio, it said that you graduated from Dalhousie with a physics degree. So tell me about that. How does a guy who's in SEO go from physics to SEO? Tell me that early stage of your life.
It actually has to do with romance. It's a romantic story, I guess. Being a typical university student, I met my future wife in a bar. So she was learning English in Canada, and she's Korean, and she had to return back to Korea. So instead of doing physics, which is what my degree was, I decided, hey, I'll do what every white guy going to Korea does, and I'll just teach English. And so I taught English in Korea for 3 years, saved up some money, and I was like, oh, okay, my physics degree, I'm not really sure about it anymore. I don't know what to do with it. It was like the internet was sort of booming at that time. It was a time where if you just said, hey, I have a website, oh, here's $1 million. Like people were just offering you huge amounts of money if you said you had a website, if you wanted to build a business online. So I thought, wow, I got to get into this. I have to jump on the internet craze. And I used the money that I saved from working overseas to build my very first website, my very first major website, I should say. I had a website when I was in Korea as well that actually got visitors. But this one was the first major one with the e-commerce platform, and it was quite elaborate. Nowadays, you can build a website or build a business pretty cheaply online. You can set up a Shopify store, pay like $50 a month, and you have a website and e-commerce, everything. When I was setting it up, you actually had to spend some serious money. Like even, I remember I had a brief stint where I worked as a project manager, and we were selling 5-page websites. 5 pages. This is like
count them,
small,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're selling them for like $20,000. It wasn't something you could just jump into. It was expensive to develop because there just wasn't that many people that knew how to develop websites.
Yeah, when you say that you're the SEO guru, people, they understand that. But way back in 98, I want people to understand the journey that you've taken and that pioneering aspect back in 1998.
Yeah, it was a crazy thing because I did a couple things. What happened was the name of my company is Global Net Trade. So what happened was I thought, what if I build online? I'm from Cape Breton, which is like this really destitute island in Canada.
It's a beautiful place too.
Place, but like 30% unemployment, just really like having issues. And I thought, one of the things that I saw was like businesses really needed a place to promote themselves. Because what happens was banks wouldn't invest. As a business in Cape Breton, you couldn't get investment. It was very difficult. Often you had to go to the government to get investment. And whenever you deal with the government, you're always at a loss. They put so many regulations, it just kills the business. So I decided to create this platform where they could basically build a profile online and advertise that they're looking for investment. But then as I was in the process of building that, I found out that was illegal. Like you're not allowed to do that. So the government basically said that you had to pay like a registration fee of $1 million per province that you want to advertise, like that you want to be available in. So I was like, well, okay, there's 10 provinces and then there's international issues. The business failed instantly once I heard about those regulations. So I decided, well, okay, I can't bring businesses online. So what other group in Cape Breton is struggling and trying to get more visibility? And I thought, oh, artists. Like there's a huge artist community in
Yeah.
Cape Breton. And I thought, okay, I'll sell original art online. Now that was a really bad idea, just so you know. You never want to sell art online. It's the dumbest thing you can do. Because at the time, we were dealing with dial-up internet. Nowadays, you have big pictures, you can really see the art and you can understand what you're getting. But back then, you would have pictures that were this big. So, are you going to buy a $2,000 painting based on an image that's this big? Okay. So, what I had to do was like, I spent all my money just to build that website. That was a really bad idea website because I thought, oh, I'll get all these artists on. They'll pay me to be on my website. I'll generate money from that. Artists are broke. They had no money. So it was a bad idea on so many levels. But it taught me so much about business. And even a bad idea can work out. So I actually made money from that company. But what happened was I had no marketing budget. I had nothing left over from having built this website. And I knew basics of SEO. Like I understood just from looking at search engines, how they worked, how to sort of get to the top of the rankings. And I really designed the website for that purpose. So when I built the website originally, I thought every page has to sell. So on every page of the website, you could buy an item. You can always buy an item. And every page targeted a specific keyword. So what happened was out over time, the site had maybe 400 artists because I was very active. I was very aggressive back then. Quickly, what happened was in order to get the artists on my website, I leveraged a few things that whatever you have, whatever talent you have, or whatever you have that makes you special, you have to leverage. So at the time, I was young. I was like 20. Well, how old was I? Oh my goodness, 25, 26. And I used that young entrepreneur spirit. I looked younger, actually. I looked like I was 19 because I was very young looking at the time. And I used that young thing to sort of go to artists' houses. I would actually go to their house and drive to their house, okay? And say, I'm a young entrepreneur, and I'm trying to build this art website. And I use that sympathy. Oh, this poor young kid. He's trying to, and I get their sympathy. And it didn't work, actually. It still didn't work. Even with the
Well, thanks
the
for sharing
sympathy.
that. So strike that off as a trial.
No, it
It
ended up
sounded good.
working. It didn't work every time, but it worked one time that mattered. So what happened was I met Allan Bateman. We shared the same name, so it was perfect. Allan Bateman is the son of Robert Bateman. Now, Robert
Oh,
Bateman is one of the most famous artists
yes.
of the modern age for Canadian art. So once I got Allan Bateman onto my website, I said, hey, I'm not just a young entrepreneur guy anymore. I have this famous artist on my website. So you should join it too. And you can be like associated to this famous guy. Then I started getting more and more artists on. And it was cool because within a month, I had 400 artists.
Wow.
So a
Impressive.
couple of things happened in that 1 to 2 months. My site was ranked on search engines pretty much for every keyword you can imagine related to art. And then what happened was CNN was doing a story about art online. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this wasn't local CNN, it was actually CNN International.
Wow.
So they ended up seeing my website every time that they did a search for looking for companies to talk about. They kept on finding my website. So what happened was they did a 30-minute segment. 30 minutes on TV is huge, right? That's like
Oh, for
that's pretty
sure. For
major. So
sure.
they did a 30-minute segment without even telling me, actually, strangely. They didn't even tell me that they were doing this. They did a 30-minute segment on my website talking about how this new craze about buying art online and they just talked about my website. And what happened was all these European artists started calling me. It was like 4 a.m. They kept calling me saying, hey, how do I join on your website? And so I got all these artists joining. It was, an interesting experience.
That just shows you the power of connection and almost serendipity. You worked at it. You knocked on doors, you opened the
Oh
right
yeah.
door, and then because you were in a place where you were searchable, and then they said, this guy's got to be something. We better do something about
Yeah.
that. Were you on it all, or was it your site and you about you on. So
Yeah,
did they
it
interview you
wasn't
at
about
all?
me. Sadly, it wasn't
Okay.
about me. It
No,
was
it's
about the
not sad
website.
because you got something out of it. This
Yeah,
is
it was about the
cool.
website. They were talking about how the great this website was. But I was always pretty aggressive back then
Hmm.
about leveraging what I had, my youth at the time, to try to get that story. I got into the New York Times, CBC, CTV. I got onto as many channels as I could with that story. Oh, this young entrepreneur is building up a website, and oh, he has 400 artists, $2 million worth of art, and then it was $8 million worth of art. It was like this cool story that I
Did
leveraged.
so when you leveraged, did you actually phone and pitch your story to these
Yep.
other people that said,
Yeah.
"Hey, yeah, come on New York Times, come on CBC or
Yeah.
whatever."
So what at the time though, there was a really cool tool. It was a wild west back then in terms of the internet. There was a lot more stuff you could get away with. And there was this tool called Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith, if the movie, is about this young good guy that goes to Washington and fights against the system. And this website was basically the same idea that they wanted to give people, like regular people, a means to communicate with the big government. So they had every government official's email address. Okay.
Hmm.
But then they said, let's go further. They decided to go further with it, and they put every media contact on there as well. So you could actually use their website with one click, send out a press release to thousands of media agencies. So what I would do, I crafted like a whole bunch of different stories, and I kept on submitting it to the press people until they took my story. So I tried different angles. I created a whole bunch of cool stories that engaged them, and they just picked it up. And
Yeah. But you had what most people may not have, the persistence. Because what do they say? If you're doing sales, it's not the first call, it's at least 7 calls before you might even get a return call. So it is numbers. It is a numbers game. And
numbers
you're sharing some another tip, consistency and persistence.
and going out there. Like one of the things that I did early on, like in order to get some of these artists to join up, there's an artist community that's in the middle of nowhere in Nova Scotia. It's really in the middle. Like Nova Scotia is the middle of nowhere, but it's in the middle of nowhere. So, so I went to this weird artist
Only you
community.
can say it. I can't say that.
Yeah, yeah. So I went to this weird artist community. It was like a really interesting artist community, but it was like a several hour drive in the middle of nowhere. It was like winter. It was terrible driving. It was like dangerous, but I took that risk in order to like connect with artists
Mhm,
to try to
mhm.
get people to join my website. And I got a few of them to join because they said, "Oh wow, this guy is so brave to come to come here. He's
In this
putting,
weather.
yeah, it's he must be sincere." And people kind of see that when you do that extra effort,
Yeah.
they really appreciate that.
And I think sometimes it's the early adopters. It's the people that are visionary and say, this is a good thing. If I do this, it's going to help my business. It may cost
Mhm.
money, but it helps my business, which in turn, helps me in the long run. And sometimes once the adopters get on, other people then do it. Why was the first one art?
Originally, as I said, it was supposed to be businesses that I was going to bring online, do profiles, give them ability to promote their businesses online. And when that business failed, I thought, oh, who is another big group of people that I can get online, charge a small fee to be on the website, and then maybe make a business out of that. So that was the idea. Actually, my website that was built, it was actually launched in 1999. It had all the functionality that Facebook has now. It actually did.
Impressive.
It was like way
It's
ahead of its
impressive.
time.
I hope people really appreciate what a pioneer you were. And so I want to now talk about something that you shared before briefly. You said you launched a major website. Tell us a little bit about that. And I understand that there was a hiccup in that journey as well.
My art website was my first major site. But then what happened was, as I said, I was getting a lot of press releases and a lot of things in the media. And what happened was a real estate agent approached me. And he said, "Hey, I see that you did so much success with this art website. Could you do the same with a real estate website?" And I was like, "Sure, easy. I can get anything to the top of the rankings." That was what I could do back then. And so he basically gave me his URL and I built a website for him. I built everything and we decided to split the money 50-50. And within 1 to 2 years, he made $100 million in sales. So it was a pretty major deal. Then I decided, hey, this site is doing really well. What if I expanded across all of North America? So then I basically had 150 sites with 150 agents on it. And then I had the number one site in every real estate market across North America. And I was generating about $200 to $300 million worth of leads per day. So yeah, I guess that was my most major site.
Yeah. That's why I think of that as the major site. But yes, the art one was the first major. This was the second major.
Second major. And it was doing really well. But then a whole bunch of bad things happened all at once. My partner, he kept on complaining because the only way that to make it legal was that he had to accept as a commission. He had to say that there was a cost associated to his commission. But all of a sudden, he was just processing all these commissions that it looked weird that he was getting all these commissions, and he was worried that it would make him look bad in terms of his accountant. So he was nervous about that. And then we sorted that issue out. But then he made my cut really small, even though it was all my work. I had built the website. Everything was me. All he owned was the URL, which is $10. That's really all he had.
His ROI was big.
Yeah, he did really well. And then what happened was my business was so big at that time that he thought, hey, what if he starts a real estate agency? And he started Right at Home Realty. And I was supposed to be one of the partners in that company. But he had another partner as well. And he basically said, okay, we don't really need this internet guy. He never understood the internet. Even after all the success that I had brought him, he never understood it. And he basically said, one day he gave me a call and he said, thank you for all your help. We're not going to use you anymore. And he took everything.
He took the whole website.
He took everything, like everything. And he didn't pay me on all the past commissions that he owed. So it was like millions of dollars lost in a phone call. And I was like, wow, what? I built everything. I did all the work. He didn't do anything. Actually, he didn't do anything. All he did was act as that connection between myself and the other agents. That was it. So I sued him. And he not only I was supposed to be part owner of that other company, their Home Realty, which is actually the fastest growing real estate agency in North America. I was supposed to be part owners of that. I lost all my stuff. I lost everything overnight. And I tried suing. I ran out of money suing. They agreed that they were in the wrong. But then the lawyer said, well, if you really want to get the money from them, you're going to spend years to try to get that money, and it's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. I didn't have the money at the time. It was just a really rough time for me. So I lost everything overnight on one phone call. So yeah, that business sort of, it went really big and then crashed overnight.
I'm stunned to hear this, and I can only imagine what you went through, and the fact that you can still talk about it, and you're talking about it openly, right? Because some people would say, that's a shame that I want to hide a chapter of my life. Mm-hmm. Is there any kind of lessons learned that you can share with the people who maybe are equally stunned and thinking, how did that happen? How did he get through this?
So I'm one of those people that believes in the handshake kind of level of business arrangement. Uh-huh. That's not a good way to run a business, especially once the business gets to a certain point. You got to go beyond that handshake and get some contracts involved, get some legal protections involved. That was my mistake. I didn't really have those legal protections.
Yeah.
So that was a lesson learned. And even the people that you think are your best friends, once the money gets too big, it's amazing how many people are willing to give up a friendship for a few dollars. Like he thought that, oh, instead of, why do I have to pay millions of dollars to this guy? I can just keep the money myself. That's the way he thought. Yeah. He didn't really understand the value that I brought. So what happened was it went from generating $200 million worth of leads a day to nothing. Once I was taken out of the picture, it died instantly. But he didn't understand that. They couldn't wrap their heads around what I was doing. And that's maybe because SEO was so young, even at that time.
But in that, if he didn't recognize that you would think that within months he would realize, hey, the sales are down, and this was what was generating it. That
Yeah, you'd think that. But it's amazing how short-sighted people are. They just don't get it. They really just they don't see that vision. So yeah, it's amazing. I find that one of the things that kills, and this is something that all business people should really, one thing, if you get anything from this video, one thing that you should learn is that you should never focus solely on like the moment and getting like how much money can I get right now.
yeah,
Always look
yeah.
long term,
Hmm.
and being honest and being ethical can actually save your business.
Yes.
So like one of the things that I find that greed, when it's misplaced, it can really kill a business. I've seen so many businesses where it's been millions of dollars involved, and it was just people like, oh, I want a bit more, I want too much, where they want more than
Yeah,
they
yeah,
deserve, and the business fails because of that. So don't let greed sort of make you short-sighted. Always
yeah.
see the future and see that the bigger picture.
Yeah, and when you have a mentality of plentifulness and there's enough to go around, it seems to make it easier to generate more money.
Yeah,
Sometimes greed can bite you in the back or bite you in the butt when
yeah,
you same idea, but
yeah.
when you do it, because then it can implode on you. And I want to mention the fact about the contracts, because I think a lot of people just do that. They have a handshake. And it's come to light during COVID times that a lot of business owners have never had a contract with their employee, that
Mhm.
any salary increases has been just a comment. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
okay, I'm going to give you a buck an hour more. And it's on payroll, but it's never in writing. And now they
yeah.
have no contract. And with these COVID times, there's very interesting things that are going on. And that's when people say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have a contract. And they're looking
Yeah,
away like, well,
yeah, yeah.
we can still rectify this now, but the past is the past. But you and I are giving advice: get a contract with a partner, with your
With
staff,
your
whatever it
employees,
is.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I'm
yeah.
I'm in a couple of partnerships right now, and we're developing contracts because this is the time to do it when you're still talking to each other, when you have the hope of building, for sure.
Hmm.
What happened? Fast forward now, unless you want to share a little bit
Sure,
in
yeah,
between. Fast forward to 2008. You were mentioning that you wanted to share something about what happened during the financial crisis in the US that then came across the border to impact on that. And what did that do to your business?
so I'll connect the 2 points.
Sure.
So what happened was after that big business failed, I still had a lot of people asking me, how did I do that? How did I do that kind of thing? And I ended up doing, I'd say, oh, I can help you. I can help your business. And
And
so
this
I
is
ended
what
up,
year now when
this
you're
is
talking?
back in 2005.
Okay.
So I started doing like little projects for people. I helped a big financial company generate millions of dollars per month and things like that. Like, where just little things on the side.
A
And
million bucks is not little, but yes, I'll
yeah,
let you carry on.
yeah. So I was doing these things, and I kept on getting more clients that would just buy my services where I'd help them with their SEO. But what happened was I built up a reasonable business. I was making a few thousand every month, a steady income. But 2008 happened. And what happens whenever there's a financial crash, the first thing that companies cut, and it's the dumbest thing to cut, is marketing. And one of the things that they also do is they say, well, we shouldn't really cut marketing, but maybe we can save money on it. So what they'll do is they'll say, okay, this guy in Canada, he's pretty expensive, or we can hire somebody in India or somewhere like the Philippines or somewhere cheaper. And they're basically the same. It's just they're interchangeable. And what happened was a lot of I'm offering it a service at like $1,000, let's say. Well, in India they might offer it for $50. So there was no way for me to compete on my own service.
Right, right.
So what I did was I said in 2008, I'm going to go out of business if I keep on selling SEO. If I sell marketing, I'm going to go out of business because there's no way that I can justify my prices when other people are saying it much cheaper,
Yep.
like way cheaper. If they think of it as a pure commodity, if I'm selling the same product as somebody else, then there's no way I can compete. So what I decided to do was I became the SEO guru. So instead of
That's when you
selling,
coined that phrase.
yeah,
Okay.
that's when I coined it. I said, hey, what I'll do is instead of selling SEO, I'll sell myself. I'll sell the SEO guru. I'll sell this thing that nobody else has, that nobody else has this experience. I'll sell that. I'll sell this concept of the high-end quality SEO professional that you just can't get anywhere else. And people are willing to pay for that. They're willing. Right, it's sort of like, why do people buy Louis Vuitton bags? Well, they're buying it because it's a Louis Vuitton bag. Right. It's not. That was the concept that I came up with and branded it. I could get myself ranked for it on the search engines. I got myself within a week. I was #1 for that keyword. I did all these things and then
you make it sound so easy. All of us are struggling to get ourselves up the SEO ladder.
Well, I do it. So like I've optimized probably about 3,000 businesses over the years. So I have more experience than most companies do that do this. Like,
I like how you say, and you use the word that I was thinking of as you were talking, commodity. Some people will provide you with marketing, with SEO, with human resources, but they provide it as a commodity. Yeah. And when we want to pay for somebody who has the strategic thinking, the experience, and the sabe, then you hire an expert. And that's what I've always say, hire me because I'm an HR expert. Don't hire somebody necessarily because they know how to write the policy. I know how to make that policy future-proof, scalability, risk-proof. And that's what you're paying for, your expertise. They're paying for you to bring them up to the top because you know how to do it.
One of the advice that I give to companies all the time is become the guru. Become that guru because it distinguishes your product or your service from somebody else's because you're not selling that commodity, you're selling the guru. You're selling that. Yeah. So that's definitely something I've always recommended, and it worked.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did it work then?
So basically I doubled my business that year during 2008.
During the downturn.
Impressive. The downturn. Yeah. And I've scaled my business even more since then, but after a while, I used it as a way not just to get clients through that higher end product, but to really go into more public speaking. I'd go as the SEO expert. I'd go in as the SEO guru and really start teaching. I did a lot of volunteer teaching where I taught at the AMCA has like a small business program that they help people with. Mm-hmm. I started doing that. I even won their Man of the Year award for the businesses I helped. So that was like a cap in my feather kind of thing. So it was like, I was doing all these things to leverage that whole concept of the guru, of the teacher, of somebody that's the expert. Yeah. So, and the other trick that I did was, this is a kind of a cool trick. And if any businesses can think of how to use this for their business, it's something that I really recommend. I really branded myself as the SEO guru, but I took it one step further where I basically licensed myself out to companies. So I did sort of like the Donald Trump method where he uses his name and puts it on to different things. I use that with my SEO guru thing where I basically allowed other companies to resell me. So I let them say, oh, we have this SEO expert on our staff. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I basically let them, I created pricing that was where I can still make a good profit, where they could basically take that price, double it, and sell it to their clients. So instead of having to search for clients myself, right, what I was able to do was just get other companies to start selling me as the SEO guru, as their SEO guru. And that was kind of a cool trick that I did where I went from having like maybe 5-10 clients to I have about 400 clients now. And it's really through getting these resellers that just resell my thing. They do all the work, they manage the clients, they do all that work for me, and they just resell my services. I just do the services.
Yeah, so it lets you focus on what you like to do, not the marketing or the administrative stuff. And I think sometimes we forget that. If we have an hourly rate, we don't think that hourly rate includes the structure. If we've got offices, the marketing, the sales, the staff that you would have, and maybe things you don't want to do. Whereas if you have somebody who's a seller, a reseller, if you want to call it that, and they take their cut, well, that's part of the marketing I don't have to worry about now. So that money is actually more than one thing, but mentally we can't make that shift. So I like how you point that out, and I want to reinforce that sometimes having people that you partner with that will sell for you really does have a win proposition to it.
It's quite huge, actually. Any project, probably 50% of the work or more, is just managing the client.
Yeah.
Like the client will have questions, they'll keep on harassing you about different things. And that's a lot of work. And it's not work that you're getting paid for. It's work that, they just, oh, I'm just calling to ask a simple question. They take up a lot of time. It's like the 80-20 rule. It's like 80% of the work is just managing that client. So taking that time out of my thing really freed me up to do more. Another trick that I recommend, because you said the hourly thing, I always avoid the hourly. Okay. So what I do is I always talk about project. Because like for me, like the concept of hourly is actually bad. So like, for example, let's say I charge $1,000 for a project. Well, if I can do that project in 5 minutes, that's pretty
cool.
good.
Cool.
The client can be happy that the project it doesn't happen that much. I'm just giving an example.
I can just see your client saying, "Excuse me, is that 5 minutes for this $1,000, or is it 40 minutes?"
It doesn't actually happen.
But I understand what you're saying. I understand.
If you can do it quicker, right? You can make more money. So, but if you're hourly, well, what you're going to be doing is you're limited in terms of how much money you can make, because you only have 24 hours a day. So one thing I've found is what you do is you always quote out by project. And if you have people working for you, you quote out hourly.
Yes, of course.
You do the opposite.
Yes,
right?
Yeah. Of course, of course.
So I take advantage of one end where I make it a project, and then I take advantage on the other end where I make it hourly, where I can get as much out of that hour as possible.
I know myself, I sit down and I calculate how much time it would take me to do this project. And then I figure out what is the optimum amount, give or take. And then I quote project, because nobody wants to be watching the clock. Nobody wants to pay nickel and dime.
Exactly.
So what I like to say is, this is the cost. This is what I'm going to do. This is the cost. And usually they don't say, well, how many hours is that? And if it is, I'll say that it's a range. But I'm willing to go and do whatever it takes to get the job done for you. And I've priced it where I think this is the amount of time on average that we'll need.
But there are risks in that.
Sure.
Sometimes you quote really well, where you make the $5, 5 minute thing to get the 1,000. Other times it's more like you quoted out and you took 100 hours,
I think the variable oftentimes for everybody, and particularly my business, because it's human resources, is it's the unknown time of client interface and client service, and you want to do a good job. So it's just part of what it is, right?
Yeah. I've had clients where, they're really quick. They give you everything you need and you can do the project. Other clients, I had one client, it took 2 years to finish a project. It's because they were like, I send them something and say, hey, just approve this. And a month later, they would approve it. And okay. And it's like, it's just so painful.
That's where the contract comes in handy, not the handshake.
Exactly,
so I'll say two rewrites. Because 6 rewrites later is just like too much, right?
Exactly.
So they know that they got to get it right the third time, right? They don't get a second chance, or they'll pay the hourly rate at that point.
So these are things to watch out for. You learn these lessons.
I know, these are lessons learned. And I think the interesting thing about this podcast is I've been on lots of podcasts. It's usually tips on how to do something. But this podcast, we want to make different. We want people to hear the stories behind what you've done. And then I add some anecdotes of what I've done, because then people learn, and they learn either that they're not alone or something that they should avoid. So, and this focuses the time on it. It doesn't focus a 5-second soundbite, because there's so much richness in what you shared. I was young. So when you're young, you almost don't know your risks enough to worry about it. So that gives you the freedom to try stuff. It's so liberating. And then you get older and set in your ways, and you've learned a few lessons. So you're maybe not quite as open and free to trying stuff. And then you've got mortgages and children, and that adds the other layer. So it's really good. Anything else? I know you wanted to also talk a little bit about building your business online, marketing it online.
So one of the things that I didn't have, as I said, was the knowledge of whether or not things would work. Is this a good business idea? But nowadays, what you can do is you can do a Google search. you can do a basic search to see how many businesses are doing that idea. So let's say you want to start a restaurant, like a new restaurant, what you think is a new idea, like a new chicken restaurant. You type in chicken restaurant. Well, then you get a million results on Google. Then you know what your competition level is. You get that sense. Also, what you can do is use like things like the Google Keyword Planner, and you can actually know how many people are searching for that product or service. And what you can do is based on the numbers, you can say, well, if I get this many people searching, well, how much business is there for me to generate? And that's huge to know. That knowledge of how much activity is or how much demand there is really huge, because I didn't have that when I started the art website. I didn't know, is there going to be like millions of people looking for art and therefore I could sell lots of art? Or is there just no interest at all? Knowing that interest really makes a difference. And you can find that out within a few clicks of the on the computer. So that's pretty great.
And
That
what's that?
knowledge.
What's that search or Google?
It's called. So go to Google and just go in, type in Keyword Planner, and what you'll do is they'll transfer you over to Google AdWords. And what Google does is it wants to sell AdWords. So it tells you what people type in and how many people type it in, so that you can bid on that. But you don't have to pay for it. I'm just saying you get that knowledge of how many people are searching for it to do that market insight.
Any tips and strategies on using Google Ads other than just to search and then get out for free?
So the way, like I'm an SEO guy, so I generally try to get the free rankings. But with ads, there's two different philosophies. AdWords is about the short term. So like doing SEO can take months to get that ranking, because you have to build a website, you have to build up that traffic, you have to build up the rankings to get to the top. It can take months to get that ranking. But with AdWords, you just pay the money and you're ranked. It's instant. So there's that quickness about it. And if you're doing something where you need a quick result, like if you're targeting something where you want to get clients quickly, AdWords is the way to go, because
So if you're going to have a webinar next 2 months from now, or an event,
something like that,
use that.
Or if there's a product that's very timely, you might want to do that. Or Facebook is better. I'd recommend Facebook for timely products, or YouTube. That's a really huge marketing thing. It's so insanely cheap. It's like Google, like average AdWords spend is roughly like $1 a click. So every time somebody clicks your ad, you're paying about $1. And in certain industries, I've seen up to $200-300 a click. It's just insane how expensive it is. But YouTube, which, just so you know, if you have a video, you're more likely to get conversions, because people get that face-to-face. They see you, they get to feel what kind of person you are. It increases conversions by 5 times, that face-to-face. And what happens is the cost on YouTube is insanely cheap. It's 1 cent a view.
Wow.
So 1
great
cent.
Great tip, everybody. You have to stay too close to the end to get this tip.
Yeah, so 1 cent it's just like, well, that's really cheap. So if you make your video have like within the first 10 seconds, a really strong, compelling message with all the information that they need, and most people click skip video. But if they get it within that 10 seconds before they can skip it, basically what you've done is you've gotten a free ad. You don't pay for it if they skip the ad. So you can get fairly cheaply a lot of potential business. So,
I love your tips. I've always loved your tips, Allan.
So that's one trick that I've been using a lot more lately, because it's just so cheap. Like I love saving money. I love saving money. It's the thing of me.
Where does this entrepreneur spirit come from? Well, you started young, you built your art site, your real estate site, you've got 3,000 businesses have used you. And I hear you constantly thinking of ways to do things from an entrepreneur's perspective.
So one thing that I've always believed in is the power of competition. I'm a very proud capitalist. So I believe in this whole spirit of competition, and that it can destroy you, especially when these kind of businesses, like I told you, I had $1 million businesses overnight get destroyed. But what I've learned is that when you have intense competition And in SEO, it's pretty much still the Wild West. There's not much regulation. There's that high level of competition. So if you want to maintain that kind of business, you have to be entrepreneurial. You have to be aggressive. You have to be able to shift on a dime. You have to be able to see the future. You have to be able to do all these things in order to maintain that business. But if you're able to do all that, you can be very successful. So whenever there was a downturn, I'm like, oh yes, there's a downturn, because I know my competition is going to be out of the business, but I'll remain and I'll pick up all their clients.
Yeah. Spirit of risk taking. You always strike me as being so calm. And then behind that is, oh yeah, I've got 3,000 businesses that I've helped. Really? Wow. Impressive.
Yeah. So, but you have to have that, as long as that spirit of competition remains within business and you keep that within your heart when you're running a business, that you know that the next day you could be, and you have to always fight for it. That if you can maintain that spirit, you'll always be successful.
Did you have that as a kid growing up?
I did some stupid businesses. I didn't necessarily have always the best ideas, but the point is, usually if you look at every successful entrepreneur, they had so many failures before they became successful. It's a trial and error thing. You learn from each failure. Don't start an art business. don't do all these stupid things. Learn from these videos, and so you don't have to make the same mistakes we did. But the point is, when you do a business, don't be discouraged. Picking yourself up from a failure is more important than becoming successful. Because if you can pick yourself up from a major failure, then you are ready for the next hard time that's going to come up. There's always going to be something crazy that's going to happen. So you just have to be ready for it. Look at the world right now. We're in like lockdown. We're in this COVID situation, which is crazy, but it breeds a huge opportunity. This is the biggest opportunity that has been known to mankind. Opportunity.
And it's global. It's simultaneously around the world. It's not just one isolated area. It's global.
This is the biggest opportunity, like a good thing. This is actually a good, I know it sounds bad that we're in this lockdown situation, but it's actually a huge opportunity, because the more of the situation, the bad situation, the bigger it is, the bigger the opportunity. So the point is, the way I see right now is it's a time where everybody is thinking about, how do I go online? Because everyone's working from home. Everyone has to now figure out how to make this work, right? So that's a huge opportunity. And that's where my shift was. When the lockdown happened, I lost half my business overnight. I lost half my business. I was like, what? That's crazy. But I rebuilt it because I was able to make the shift. I was like, okay, I've experienced hard times before. How do I shift? I got to do this. I got to do this. And what I did was I said, okay, what businesses are going to want to sort of expand during this time? And it was like IT companies that are making that digital shift. Also, there's a big thing for me where I teach businesses how to make that digital transition. Because for example, my son does karate. And normally you go to the school, you do the karate, the teacher's there and they guide you. But all of a sudden, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to go to that physical location. And those schools had a choice. They could either go out of business or they could adapt. And most people don't want to go out of business, so they adapt, right? And so what they did was they started offering those same lessons online. Now, my son can learn from home. He can, still take part in the class. He sees the teacher on Zoom. He gets to see even the other fellow classmates. They can all interact with each other. And there's still that feeling where he can learn the lesson. Well, what that does for that business, they've learned how to make that digital shift. Well, once things open up again, they can open up their school again. Well, they don't have to give that up. Now that augments to their business. It actually builds their business. So they're not limited to that one physical location. They can now offer the service around the world. So all of a sudden, it really opens up the business. So that's a huge opportunity
that people didn't think before. Yeah. And I think the other support for that coincides is that we as people have learned to adapt, to be flexible, and to not be rigid. That means people are willing to try, whereas before they might not have been willing to try a virtual class. They don't have a choice, but they've learned now to just go with the flow, and change is inevitable right now.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I think it's a perfect storm, so to speak. You've got people having to make changes, people more willing to make changes than they would have been in pre-COVID times. So
yeah.
it's
And people are
amazing.
desperate for that connection, right? We
Oh
were
yeah, I'm waiting for virtual like to real networking again, so I can actually shake somebody's hand or I give them a hug or
exactly.
rather than do it over the air
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff.
I want things to go back to normal. Like I think we are social creatures. We need that social
And I
engagement.
think we've come to realize that. I think those people that are negative, I hope they're
Mhm.
learning to see the positive side of things. And I appreciate you coming on today and sharing so much of your journey, your entrepreneurial spirit, your ability to take those risks. That's really, I think, been valuable for those people who have that joined us today. I want to end by just asking you if there's anything in particular you want to share with our people that are listening today. Well, like what's coming up now and what do you want to share with us about that?
So one of the things is I am very future driven. I try to see the future and where the opportunities lie. The future that I see is that we are in a stage now where not only big companies have big data issues, but even small companies have big data issues. Where just imagine like a company, even if it has 10 employees, well, it has to manage all the emails, it has to manage all the social media accounts, it has to manage all the files that are on those computers, it has to manage all the interactions that they have with the people that they engage with. It has to manage all of that data. That's a big data
Mm-hmm,
problem.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And even as the individual, we have all the stuff on our computers, we have all the websites that we own, we have all this stuff. And finding stuff, if did you ever try to do a search on Facebook and you're trying to like find like something you wrote in the past or an old tweet or something like that, you're just trying to find this little piece of information that you posted out maybe a year ago or whatever. It's impossible. It's lost.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Sure. Yep.
so one of the things that I've seen, and I see this demand, is the idea of creating a search engine that is designed for you as an individual or as you as a small business. A search engine of that's personalized. Personal search is what I call it. And it's a concept that I came up with 8 years ago, actually. So it's an older concept of mine that is sort of
The
coming into play.
futurist 8 years ago.
Yeah,
Yes.
so yeah, so I saw the future that we would need this. And so what I've done is with my brother's the smart one in the family, we've built this search engine technology.
You
And
both are. You both
yeah,
are.
yeah. So he did all the coding and stuff. So I consider him smarter. So he did all the coding. We built this search engine technology that allows people to just basically within one click, they download the software and they have their own search engine. They can basically have Google in a box where it's better than Google
Cool.
because you can tailor it to your own specific
Yep, yep,
needs.
yep, yep.
And we have several thousand users that use this technology, and
And
it's
do you
called Yoop.
subscribe? It's called what?
It's called Yoop.
Oh, I've heard of you.
Yeah, it's yoop.com, and it means help in Vietnamese. Yoop.
Ah,
His wife
okay.
is Vietnamese, so
I was going to say not Korean, so now I know why.
yeah,
It's his
yeah.
wife.
We like Asian
He
women. I don't
coded
know.
it. He gets to call it that.
We
Okay.
we so we have that technology, and people can use it. It's used in so many different ways. It's actually a very cool technology.
So is it free or do you
It's
subscribe
free.
for it?
It's free. We created some things where we can make some money off it,
Yes, of course. I would ask that
but
question next, but good.
it's a free technology. It's
And
you,
thank you to making it free for people.
yeah, it's open source, so people can actually contribute to it and build it and add their own little functionality to it. But it's a kind of a cool technology that allows people to have Google in a box, basically.
Oh, well, success to that. I'm going to have to go in and look every night at dinner now. And during COVID times, we changed dinner habits of eat and run to
Mhm.
dining. So we have conversation, like we have a real conversation
Oh, that's good.
as a family. And so for 45 minutes, and invariably, not a night goes by when I don't have to pull up my phone and do a Google search because there's something in the conversation we need instant gratification on the answer to.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe it'll be now that I go into you as well.
Yeah, no, it's actually quite cool. It can do some really cool things. Like one of the things that we did was we created a technology within the technology that can predict the future in terms of where news is going.
Ooh.
It actually can predict the news stories of the day. It's like it scans all the media and actually can basically index all that information because it can tailor the search. You can design it to whatever you
My
want.
brain can't even figure out how you would begin to code the logic for this.
Yeah, it's pretty.
So
That's why
thank
I said my
goodness they
brother's
have
the smart
futurists
one.
like you and your brother to help us create some of the technology that you dreamed about 8 years ago. Thank you
Yeah, yeah,
kindly.
yeah. So it's cool. It can predict what are the news stories of the day and allow you to see sort of that news trend where stories are going, like what's driving the conversation.
That's
It's
cool.
it's it's pretty cool. So
How do
um,
people get a hold of you?
easiest way is to search SEO Guru. Go to Google, search SEO Guru.
Of course,
I'm usually number one in the world.
you are.
And you can find my website. It's just allanpollett.com and reach out to me. I'm really easygoing. Like people can just call me and I generally answer the phone. I'm generally awake when people answer the phone, when I answer the phone too. So that's my easiest way.
Well, Allan, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure knowing you for several years
Yeah,
and
no,
your
for a long time.
passion for SEO and your all around just wanting to help people.
Mm-hmm.
And you make money along the way, which is good. And I'm glad
Yeah.
that it happens and you've lost money and I feel bad about that. But your resilience and your ability to bounce back has been a story for my listeners to hear. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing your successes and the journeys and lessons that you've learned along the way.
Okay, thank you for having me again. And if you ever need me for the future, I have lots more stories to tell.
Oh, I'm sure I think we talked a fair bit today. I think we can have a chapter 2 on this later on.